Today is February 11th, 2023, and this week there were 193 reported cases of COVID-19 in Charlotte-Mecklenburg County, which shows a 16% decrease over the last 2 weeks. Therefore, each subject is comfortable not wearing a mask. Lucas, thank you so much for joining me today and allowing me to interview you for the Living Archives.
Of course, yeah.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Did you have a good morning?
Yeah, it's been a pretty good morning. I worked out.
Nice. That's always good. Gives you good, happy hormones.
Yeah.
So let's start off with just a simple question of where are you from? Where were you born?
So I was originally born in Bellevue, Washington, which is, I don't know if you're familiar with Washington and Bellevue and Seattle and all that stuff, but it's across I like to say it's across the water from Seattle, because you have to take a ferry to get across. I mean, you could drive around, but if you take a ferry, you can go straight across and go straight to Seattle. So I was born right next to Seattle.
I bet that was beautiful.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
So when did your family move here?
So my family moved here in 2002, 2003. Yeah, my mom, one of her sisters moved down to North Carolina, Burlington, North Carolina, actually. And my mom came and visited her for about a week and fell in love with the place and went back to Washington and was telling my dad all about it. And my dad got excited too and said, okay, yeah, this sounds like a good place, to live, to raise the kids, because I'm one out of 7. So,
Family.
Yeah. And so they sold the house and moved down to Burlington, North Carolina in 2002, 2003. So it was...
And then how did you end up in Charlotte?
Yeah. So I went to high school in Burlington and went to a community college actually at a small city, Graham, North Carolina, right next to Burlington. And was looking at going to a 4-year university. And so I was kind of torn between NC State in Raleigh or UNCC in Charlotte. And I ended up coming here to Charlotte and UNCC because they offered a more theoretical, more theory courses than NC State at that time. So I said, okay, yeah, I'm in.
You said theory courses on what?
Well, when I came here to Charlotte and went to UNCC, the faculty was more about the theory of architecture rather than the technical aspect of architecture. So immediately, like the first year of starting school at UNCC, the School of Architecture, I was introduced to various artists. There's so many different artists. So the Giacometti is one. Richard Serra is another one. There's a whole bunch. And going to school, it was like, well, how did this artist or architect address the concept of space? And then they tied that back to architecture. So it was a whole bunch of architectural theory, like how to address the space, how different people address the space, and then how people interact with the space.
Nice. So you're in architecture.
Yes, I am. Yeah, I graduated from UNCC, the School of Architecture, in 2018. And I was actually hired by a small architecture firm local to Charlotte in my last year of college. So I graduated in 2018 and I was working in 2018 and I've been in architecture ever since.
Nice.
Yeah.
It sounds like you enjoy it.
Yeah, I love it, actually. Yeah, as a kid, I used to make cities and towns and buildings with Legos. And I don't know if you've ever used popsicle sticks to build stuff. But
maybe for other purposes, like eating ice cream.
Yeah, so you glue them together and you make make a wall, make a building, things like that. And so I always loved that. And then when I was in high school, actually, one of the art teachers, because I took art classes in high school, she had an assignment for everybody, end of year assignment, and she said, I want everybody to choose an artist. Doesn't matter, anything counts as art, for the most part. It doesn't matter who they are. It could be an architect, artist, music artist, painting artist, whatever. And so I chose Frank Lloyd Wright. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Frank Lloyd Wright, but Frank Lloyd Wright, he's from Chicago, and he kind of like influenced a lot of architecture, like maybe 50 years ago, 40 years ago, something like that. Mm. And it was him, and I think there was Louis Sullivan and a whole bunch of others. But he was pretty inspirational for me. Actually, my parents had gifted me a book when I was like 10 that was like Frank Lloyd Wright, and I would like flip through and look at all the different like buildings that he designed and things like that. And so when I got the art assignment, I said, okay, well, I'll do an architect. I asked her beforehand. I said, can I do this guy? And she said, yeah. So I went home and I did all the research and looked at all the different buildings that he had done. A lot of it's in Chicago, around where he's from. But of course, they're all over the United States. And actually, when I was going to the School of Architecture at UNCC, I went up to Chicago and was able to look at a bunch of his works that he'd done.
So did you know that you wanted to go into architecture since you were young?
Yeah. Well, I loved building, and then doing the art project, freshman year of high school. I was like, yeah, this is pretty amazing. I wanted to like design like spaces and create spaces for people. And so, yeah, I think I've always had like an itch, not an itch, a yearning for architecture. Yeah. And the funny story about that is when I was in high school, I said, I really want to do architecture. And so at that point we were allowed to like choose our own classes. They gave us the whole book, with all the different classes, and we could choose them. And so I saw one and it said like drafting. And I was thinking in my head, drafting is architecture. So I signed up for it and was like, okay, that's it. And I went to the class, and it wasn't architectural drafting. It was mechanical drafting, which is almost like the complete opposite of what I wanted to do. So instead of drawing houses and things like that, I was drawing like transmissions and motherboards and circuits and stuff like that. And interesting thing about me is I like to, once I like start something, I don't like to like stop it. So that was my sophomore year of high school, and I did the whole class, and they offered the architecture drafting again, but I had already done the mechanical drafting that year. So I said, okay, well, I'll take the second one of mechanical drafting, and then the third one of mechanical drafting. So I ended up doing 3 years of mechanical drafting in high school. Wow. I stuck with it, and then it went into community college as well. I did mechanical draft. Actually, my degree in mechanical drafting. I got an associate's degree in mechanical drafting from a community college, and then I was like, at the end of it, I was like, oh man, this isn't what I wanted to do. But now I know how to draft, like that. And so
what do you do with mechanical drafting? It's
more like with mechanical drafting, it's more like if. It's an interesting process. If it could be like manufacturers, like so a car, if you have a car, the designers at the car company are designing a car, and they need the like axle to be a certain dimension or width or something like that. Then they go to their drafters and say, all right, well, these are the specs that we need. And so the drafter draws the axle and puts all the notes, like the finished notes, and like the dimensions and the tolerances and everything like that, so it all fits together, which is okay. But for me, it was like I don't want to be a drafter doing what somebody else tells me to do, if that makes sense. Yeah. I wanted to create stuff. Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's cool. Mechanical drafting is cool. I mean, it's like the things that you design have to be so precise in order to fit with all these different interlocking parts, that there's really no room for error, which is kind of cool, that I like, but at the same time, it wasn't for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you graduated in 2018 from the architecture school at UNCC, and you started working that same year. So where were you once COVID hit in 2019?
Yeah, 2019 was interesting. I had actually I'd been working for about a year and a half, actually, when COVID hit. Graduated 2018, COVID hit around, it hit the United States really around the end of 2019, I remember. Mm-hmm. Which, I was making jokes about COVID. When COVID first came out and they were talking about it, across.
You were one of those.
Well, it's interesting because, they were saying, oh, yeah, there's COVID, and it was on the West Coast. And I said, yeah, I hope everybody's ready for like a zombie apocalypse, things like that. Because I didn't really, pay any attention to it like that. So, and then it moved all the way across the United States. And I was like, oh, man, it's rough stuff. So the end of 2019 was when I think the end of 2019, mid 2019 is when it became a pretty serious thing. Not to say that it wasn't serious before, but, it was like it reached Charlotte, because I think it started on the West Coast and then New York, I want to say. And then from there, all the hubs, Charlotte's one of these hubs. So, so yeah, in 2019, I was working at the architecture firm, and it's interesting because a lot of architecture is an essential job, by the way. So we weren't given the option to not come into work. We had to come into work. And you didn't see anybody on the streets. You didn't see anybody on the highways, really. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah, I remember like just being at home and like being able to like just have more time for myself, and I would go out on streets and like do like a small run. You would see less cars around. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Well, it's crazy because in 2019, I worked for a small firm, so about 5 people in the firm, and the boss was like, well, since we have it was a big office, there have been more people working there. So he said, well, since we, only have like, a couple people, everybody can maintain the 6 foot distance, the COVID, guidelines. And, we had these cubicles, so everybody like kind of moved away from each other. So we were able to do it like that. And we would meet up in like meetings where everybody's together. We would wear the masks, and there's a lot of hand sanitizer around the office and things like that. And so for me, around 2019, the end of 2019, it didn't really change that much. I was still going to the office. A lot of people I knew were like, couldn't go into the office, but, I was still maintaining the office, going to the office type thing, which is interesting because at the same time that I was working at the architecture firm, I was also working at Amazon. And so I was working in one of the Amazon warehouses. And I actually started working at Amazon right before COVID. Yeah, around the same time, yeah. I started working for Amazon, I think, mid-2019. And the warehouse life kind of changed, which was, everybody used to come in, kind of not like push each other, but kind of, everybody's moving fast. So right next to each other moving. And when COVID hit, the guidelines, of course, all the companies set out guidelines. And so we got an email, and they said, yeah, we're looking to maintain these distances, 6 foot distances. Well, I forget, because I think the distances varied, right? It's been like 10 and 8 and 6 and something like that, I think.
I think I've always just heard 6.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's interesting because, so that's what we were doing at the firm. And then at the Amazon warehouse, everybody had to like wear masks. They were doing like temperature checks. They had everybody stationed away from each other, so nobody was right next to each other. And it was just, there was a lot of, I remember when you checked in for work, they did a temperature scan. Everybody was wearing masks. If you didn't have a mask, they'd give you a mask. When you went out for lunch and came back in, they would do it again, temperature check, a mask. And it was like, it was almost a little bit, I don't want to say like militarized. I don't know what a good word for it is, but it was so strict. The guidelines were so strict. And they would send people home. If your temperature was a little bit too high, they would say, okay, you gotta go.
Do you remember what the cutoff line for that was?
That's a good question. Actually, I can't remember that. I think it was over the regular, like if it was over 98, I want to say over 100, something like that.
Well, I'm more like wondering, like, at what point, like, yeah, like, how high did it have
Oh.
for them to send you? So was it, like, if it wasn't, like, 98, then you got sent home?
I think so, yeah. Around, I think, 1 or 2 degrees above or below. Because I remember them saying if you were at, like, 100, you know, which is, like, a degree and a half, because I think average temperature is, like, 98 point something, but then they tell you to go, and then I can't remember exactly. I don't know if they'd send you home right away or if they would say, like, wait 15 minutes and come back. Because, you know, sometimes you come in and you're flushed a little bit. So I don't know if that was the case, but I do remember people getting sent home for that. And then 2020, I was working at the firm and Amazon as well. And I remember there would be times when people would come in with COVID. Of course, the temperature scans didn't catch it. But then we'd get alerts because everybody got alerts. We'd all get the alert at the same time on our phone. You've been working around somebody who's been diagnosed as might have COVID. So everybody would get the alert at the same time.
And what would happen then? Did you ever get sent home?
I never got sent home. But we would get the alerts and then they would say, they wouldn't tell us who it was because, you know, the HIPAA laws and all that stuff. But they would say, you've been in proximity of somebody who might have COVID. And so after that, they'd say, make sure, you know, the guidelines, make sure, you know, the 6-foot distance, sanitize, wash your hands. If you're experiencing symptoms, after we got it was part of the text message. If you experience any of the COVID symptoms, then notify your HR and don't come in. And I remember it was sporadic. You know, in 2020, it was like every month. I want to say every week.
That's probably true. I don't.
Yeah, because
I would believe that.
Well, multiple things. So people, I think, did have COVID, and then at the same time, people might not have wanted to come into work, so they called up and they said, "Yeah, I might have COVID." And yeah, so that was something. And so I remember the whole of 2020 was just like COVID warning, COVID warning, COVID warning, and masks and separation and everything like that at Amazon. So
what did they provide any sort of benefits for people who?
They did. Amazon did COVID leave. So if you were experiencing symptoms and you went to the doctor, then if you got checked and it was, well, I don't know how they check whatever, but if you got checked, then it would be, you would notify your HR and you'd actually get COVID pay. Amazon was a big company, and they were able to give everybody, I say it, but, you know, everybody who had COVID or brought in a test or might have had COVID, you got COVID pay. So sometimes you didn't see somebody for about a week. Sometimes you didn't see somebody. I remember one person was out for like, I want to say a month and a half. And they came back and they said, yeah, I had COVID. And then I was next to somebody who got diagnosed as having COVID. So, of course, you know, you tell HR and you say, look, I had COVID. So they say, okay, you're getting paid. Then you say, okay, I was next to somebody. Okay, they don't want anybody to come in who's sick. So it was just a lot of, it was pretty good though. I mean, the COVID pay wasn't bad. I was actually out a few weeks due to COVID. Because I was around people, I was actually working in proximity with some people at Amazon who we were pretty good friends. And so they wouldn't come in. They'd say, yeah, I just went to the doctor, I had COVID. Oh, man. So then I'd go to HR. Yeah, I was next to so-and-so and they had it. And so they say, yeah, you know, don't come in.
Did you ever have COVID-19, either during that time or even after?
I had COVID at the end of, I had COVID in the beginning of, I want to say mid-2021. I did have COVID. And I didn't know I had COVID. And at this point, I think I had left. No, I was still working at Amazon and the firm. And I remember waking up and was just like so tired. And you know, I knew something was wrong. Like, oh man, I'm tired. And I woke up and like stretched and it's like my body was like achy. I was like, dang. Because, COVID's going around. You're working around people who might be sick. You wake up and you're feeling horrible. So I ended up going to the doctor. I lie. Actually, I didn't go to the doctor. I knew I had COVID, though. So I called HR, for both places. And I was like, yeah, I think I have COVID. And they said, both places, they said, don't come in. They said, you self-quarantine, because that was a big thing. And it still is, I think, to self-quarantine. But they said, you're going to quarantine and we'll see you at the end of 2 weeks. That's what they said. And my voice was like kind of rough when I was talking to them. I was like, oh, okay. So hung up, and this was in the morning of the day that I woke up. And I was like, oh, man, I don't really feel like doing anything. And I was like laying down. I have it was a 2-story. I'm living in a 2-story townhome. And I was upstairs and I was just so tired. And I was like, well, see, I didn't have an appetite. And I said, well, what am I going to do today? And I got up and my whole body was so tired. And I remember feeling like drained. And I think I spent the whole day in bed. And then the second day I woke up was worse. I woke up and my body was still like achy. And I said, well, maybe if I have like tea, or something like that, I might feel a little bit better. There's really no way to combat COVID. You just have to. Well, I lie. The shots, I guess, maybe. Supposedly they're good for COVID, but I went downstairs, and this is the crazy thing, because I usually am kind of happy. I'm pretty fit in shape, but going downstairs I had to like grip the rail, and I was like, oh, this is kind of odd, because as you go down, each step, it's like it almost felt like weight, Mm-hmm. Have you had COVID?
No.
Oh. Well, so going down each stair was like a weight, and I was like, oh man, well, I don't want to fall. So I held onto the rail, went downstairs, and went into the kitchen, and was looking at all the food in the kitchen. Was like, I'm not really hungry. I didn't feel hungry at all. And I said, well, maybe I can make myself like some tea. So I heated up the water, and as the water was heating up, I was like, I don't know if I want tea. I'll just go lay back down. And I went back to the stairs. And when you have COVID, I don't know if it's the same for everybody, but from the people I've heard who've had COVID, it's like, you're out. So I went and started to go up the stairs, and each step was like, I could feel like achy all over each step that I went upstairs. And about halfway through, I was like, dang, I can't breathe. So it was almost like my lungs wouldn't like.
I like how you laugh about it as you're saying it now, but I'm sure in the middle of it you were dying.
It was like, well, see, I knew I had COVID, so I was like, well, and of course, deaths have been happening, and I was like, oh man, this is serious. And so I was like, struggling for breath halfway up the stairs, and went up the next stair and the next stair. I was like, oh man. And at the landing at the top of the stairs, I was like struggling to breathe so much. I just like laid down. I just sat on the edge of the stairs and like laid back and was like trying to breathe. And I think actually I took a nap. I want to say nap, but maybe I passed out. but I was like laying down for like an hour. And then
you were living by yourself at that point.
Yeah. And I was by myself at that time. Yeah, that was 2021. Yeah. And after like an hour and a half, I sat up and my breathing was back. And I was like, dang, I have COVID. But the interesting thing about me is I like to, I don't know what the word is, like quantify things. Like, I like to count like days up to certain events. I like to count days down, for certain things. And so I was laying there and I pulled out my phone and I said, well, how long are the COVID symptoms lasting on average? And I think the average at that time was like 14 days, so 2 weeks. And I said, okay, I just have to endure this for like 2 more weeks. And I went and I lay back down. And it's crazy because when you have COVID, well, when I had COVID, I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't sleeping that great. I would like go and lay down, you know, the sun would be down, whatever. And it would almost be like hallucinations. It was crazy. I would like, maybe it was from lack of sleep or something like that, but I would like lay down and I would like close my eyes and like think, okay, I'm about to start dreaming or something. I'm about to pass out. And I'd be like, it was almost like daydreams, you know?
What kind of hallucinations did you see or daydreams? Like that is definitely something new that I haven't heard of.
Well,
So.
For me, it was like, I remember the second night, not the first night, but the second night, I was laying down and I was like, you know, everything's going to be like fine or whatever. And so I dreamed actually, well, I don't know if I was daydreaming or what, but I went through the whole motions of like an average day. So I was laying down, closed my eyes. And when I closed my eyes, I guess the dream was that I was waking up, going downstairs, making myself something to eat, getting into my car, going to work, and, you know, all that stuff. Like, just like an average day. And then I woke up and I was like, oh man, I'm dreaming all this. And then it was just like things like that, you know, like I was dreaming what I guess I wanted to do, but I couldn't do. And it was like that for like 2 weeks. It was pretty intense.
Wow, yeah, it sounds intense.
Yeah.
Especially kind of trying to do everything yourself. And you said you didn't go to the doctor.
So funny thing about that is, well, I knew I had COVID, and I was like, well, look, I feel so bad. How am I going to go to the doctor? You know, because yeah, for the whole time that I had, I didn't drive. You know, I didn't even go outside. Well, of course, the guidelines were saying don't go outside, whatever. But yeah, I didn't go outside. I didn't do any of that. And then towards the 16th day, because I counted, I woke up and I was feeling great. And I think that was a Friday. Yeah, I woke up on a Friday, no symptoms, and I went down the stairs, and I went up the stairs and was taking like big breaths, and I was like, okay, I don't have COVID anymore. And, you know, 14 days on average, 16 days, I was feeling good. So on Saturday, actually, I went to Crowder's Mountain over in Gastonia. And I woke up Saturday morning and I went jogging at Crowder's Mountain. And
you had your energy back.
I did. I was thinking, well, okay, let's see if I can do it. So I did it. And I did good time too. Yeah. And then at the end of that, actually, I went to the doctor on Monday. And she diagnosed me. I lie. Actually, I didn't go to the doctor. It was maybe 3 months after that I got sick again.
For COVID?
Yeah.
Again?
Yeah.
So you had it twice?
Yeah, I've had it twice. But, you know, the second time wasn't that bad. It was like a really bad cold. And that time I was like, well, you know, doctors, I can still drive and all that stuff. So I went to the doctor and did the test, and it came back positive. Because with COVID, there were so many different variants coming out. I think this one was, I can't remember. I remember looking at it and it said like, this is COVID, something positive. And I was sick. And so I had to let my jobs know that I was sick, and it took another 2 weeks. But, you know, it was just like a bad cold. And it was gone in like 3 days, 4 days. So.
Well, the reason I asked if you went to the doctor or not is because you had mentioned that with Amazon, they gave you COVID pay if you went to the doctor.
So that's the interesting thing. When they started doing it, yeah, you're right. So I did go to the doctor.
I don't know.
Let me think.
Tell me.
Well, I
know it's been a while, so.
Well, no, you're right. So I actually didn't go to the doctor for the first time that I had it when I was super sick, but I sent my doctor a message, and I was like, look, I'm feeling horrible. You know, I think I might have COVID. And so it was a pretty good, you know, doctor, and they sent back a note that said, okay, you're feeling horrible, you're having symptoms of COVID. So I was able to send that to the job, and the job said, okay, you know, good. And then for the second time, I actually did go to the doctor, same thing. But it was like in person. So I was like, yeah, the first time I didn't go.
But you did get some benefits through Amazon.
I did. Amazon gave you a COVID pay.
Yeah.
And then my other firm actually did. When I got COVID the second time, I let them know. And I think around that time, I forget what it was actually called, but the whole COVID thing came out for all the businesses to give. Wait, I lied. I got COVID pay from both jobs. Yeah, so I didn't miss out, thankfully.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So during COVID-19, at least when it first kind of started here, you were working 2 jobs.
I was, yeah.
Is there a reason why you were working 2 jobs?
Yeah, there was. There was actually. Well, I was going through a divorce. And I was going through a divorce, and I had actually been ordered to pay child support because I have 2 kids. And so when I first started, I was working 2 jobs because I was working on paying the child support, but also the whole divorce, the way the divorce came about, it wasn't quite sitting well with me. So I was working the 2 jobs not only to pay the child support, but also to pay a lawyer who was helping me through the whole court process. And so Amazon was beneficial to that, because at my other job, I wasn't quite making enough to do both the child support and pay for a lawyer. So yeah, since mid 2019 all the way up to, I want to say 2021, I was working the 2 jobs. So I was going to my regular job from 8 to 5, and then doing Amazon from 6:30 to 5 a.m. So for like those, I guess for like 2 years, I wasn't really sleeping, which was kind of taking a toll on me. So.
Which I'm sure made it harder for your immune system to
that's probably why I got COVID in the first place.
Well, a lot of people did, but
yeah.
But I mean, it must have been hard on your body for sure.
Yeah, it was pretty rough. Yeah, definitely. Working the 2 jobs and the COVID. So.
Yeah.
And then I think I might have caught COVID a 3rd time.
But then that time you didn't do anything.
Yeah, that time it was just like I woke up and was like feeling a little bit rough for like 3 days. And I was just like, well, what am I going to do for 3 days? So. No, but I do say that I didn't do anything, but but I let my job know, and they said, okay, quarantine. Let Amazon know, and did the same thing actually the first time. I sent my doctor a message. Was like, I think I might have COVID. Okay, same thing. Said no. So I did actually get COVID relief 3 times. Which thankfully they did it. I mean, I can't imagine, for everybody who wasn't able to make it to the doctor or didn't have a doctor's note, you would lose, 2 weeks of pay because, you have to quarantine. The jobs wouldn't let you in if you were sick, which is probably why I want to say some people actually came into Amazon and worked and got people sick because they probably didn't have like a healthcare provider, because health insurance is expensive, depending on where you go. So that's probably why I think people were coming in and like getting people sick, maybe. If you think about the economics, I guess, or not economics, but social aspect, or
like the needs of people.
Yeah, so that's probably why people were coming in and making people sick.
Yeah.
And then they might miss 2 weeks if they didn't have somebody to write them a note, and then I don't know. Sometimes you didn't see people again after they left for COVID at Amazon. They wouldn't come back. So it's just it was a very interesting situation when COVID came out. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. So I want to go back a little bit because you separated when or got divorced at what year?
2019 was the separation, and then North Carolina rules, actually, the statutes, or there's something where you have to be separated for a year before you can start the divorce process. Mm-hmm. And so 2019, we separated. 2020, we talked and was okay, we're not getting back together. So after that was the whole divorce process and everything like that. And then I did get that went on for a while, and then I think the divorce was finalized like the I want to say the 2021. Either that or 2020, because we waited a year. I don't know. I can't remember the dates.
Yeah. Sort of the end of 2020, beginning of
I think so. Yeah.
Did COVID impact anything that you were going through during the separation or divorce?
Did it? COVID.
Whether that be, or aspects of the legal piece of it, or social aspects, or like just your mental space.
COVID. Well, see, for the jobs, it didn't really change that much. Everybody just did masks and everything like that. For the social, actually, COVID did impact, because I have a group of friends. Had a group of friends. Well, they come and go, but, have a group of friends. And when COVID came out, nobody was going out anymore. A lot of small businesses actually started to shut down because of, the COVID restrictions, and nobody was coming out. And, if you didn't maintain these guidelines, then, you had to close. And I remember prior to COVID, used to go out maybe every weekend, maybe every other weekend, and grab a drink or, hang out with everybody. And then when COVID came, and all these spots started to close down. So yeah, I would have to say socially it did impact, somewhat. Well, depends. Because when all that was happening, instead of going out, we usually go to somebody's home instead, which I guess is one of the things that, was it CDC actually warned against, which was not going to people's homes, just everybody staying. So I guess, nobody that I was hanging out with got sick, but...
Except for you.
Yeah. So it was interesting because socially it changed. For going out in public, mentally everything was still pretty much, the same. I just, had stuff that I needed to get done. COVID didn't really affect that. As far as the divorce went, I don't think it did. Of course, everybody at the lawyers' offices and, the courthouses would, wear masks and things like that. But other than that, it was, I think the whole divorce and separation process was pretty much unaffected. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Mm. How did you feel about COVID-19? And you personally, mentally, what are some of the thoughts that you had around COVID-19? I know that you said at the beginning where it felt more of a... you said that you joked around it, but it feels to me more like maybe maybe it was hard to believe that it would reach here.
Well, I'm not sure if you remember the whole Ebola scare. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, of course, but I don't know if you remember the image that came out when Ebola came out, and it has all these guys in hazmat suits, next to this airplane, and then there's one guy who's just chilling, no hazmat suit or anything like that. I don't know if you remember that.
I don't think I ever saw that.
Well, and then it had a lot of people questioning, okay, so what's going on, So when COVID came out, it was people were getting sick, yeah, but the extremities, I don't know if that's the correct thing to say, but how extreme it was not as apparent, I guess, to me and I guess a lot of other people. And then when it came out, when I actually got it, because when it came out and you started hearing reports about it, it was well, maybe something a severe flu type thing, that people can recover from. But when people start to die, it was oh man, you might need to start taking this serious. And then when I got it, and I didn't feel like I was going to die. No, I don't think I ever felt like I was going to die at any point. But the symptoms were pretty intense, because it turns out I knew people who died from it. So it was pretty rough, and I'm kind of not smirking, but it was pretty serious. It was so I guess people were dying, and that kind of brought it home, so instead of being aloof about it, I was kind of more okay, this is kind of serious, because like I said, I have 2 kids, and their mom actually caught it, and they might have had it. I remember taking them to the doctor at one point, and they took like, you know, the throat swabs and all that stuff, and thankfully they weren't sick. Thankfully, because yeah, a lot of people like, you know, compromised immune systems were like getting hit hard, you know, and people were like getting put on like ventilators and things like that. So
And I mean, children have weak immune systems.
they do, yeah. It was the children and the elderly that were getting affected for the most part, and then they changed it, of course, to put like everybody. But you know, when it first came out, it was pretty rough, yeah.
So you mentioned that you lost a couple of new people who did pass away from COVID. Were they close family members, close friends?
Yeah, actually, my father died from COVID, and it was interesting because my father, he's from Bolivia, and everybody over there like loves him. You know, all the family and over there. I've been there, and it was interesting because he, ever since he was like 20, 21, he'd been like struggling with like this like a hernia, I guess, that he had that would sometimes like irritate him and give him some trouble. And I think it was, I don't know, the 2019, 2020, 21, they're all like a blur. I can't remember, but I think it was 2021 he died. And yeah, my mom sent me a message actually, and she said, "Yeah, I'm taking your dad to the hospital." He, I can't remember what exactly she said. I just found out he was in the hospital because he had his hernia was bothering him, and he was taken to the hospital for his hernia. They fixed his hernia. And then while he was in the hospital, he actually got sick. He got pneumonia, the testing for pneumonia. And at that same time, he got pneumonia. They did some more testing, and I forget when it happened, but he got COVID. And so...
While being in the hospital or once he was out?
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. Nobody is like 100% sure because... 2020, he had been complaining about like his breathing. You know, I mean, he went to work and he came back and that was it. But like throughout the last like maybe 5 or 6 years, he'd been like kind of like having a little bit of trouble with his breathing. Maybe, I don't know if it was like asthma or something like that, but you know, he would like, yeah, because he used to go for like walks outside and walk up the street and walk back. And I remember at one point, I think it was like prior to 2019, but or maybe during, I can't remember, COVID. But he was walking up the street and he ran out of breath. And luckily my brother was with him and helped him get back to the house, but it was like very odd. So yeah, when he went into the hospital, he got, you know, pneumonia, then he got COVID. And we're not sure if he got it from the hospital or if he had it prior, you know, because I mean, he didn't have any symptoms, but when he got to the hospital, he got progressively worse. And so they put him in the ICU. Yeah, it was pretty rough.
What was the environment like with the doctors around that time? What year did that happen? And then what about like the environment for you and your family? Yeah,
I think that was 2020. 2020 or 2021. I want to say 21. I think. Because I had just moved into my new place, actually. And he hadn't been to see it yet. Because, you know, Burlington, you know, and I said, yeah, you should come up and see it. He said, yeah, I'm going to come up. So this must have been 2021. I want to say 2021. Or 20. I can't remember. But going into the hospital, yeah, I would drive from Charlotte to Burlington to go see him, you know. And everybody was like wearing masks, of course, but at the same time, and talking to other people who are working in the medical field as well, I guess, you know, they made like these ICUs, like these COVID units, I guess, and it's almost like you start to see so many people die from COVID that it's kind of like, I mean, I guess nurses in general have to be kind of like almost like I don't want to say like emotionless, but you kind of get like, I think, deadened to it. It kind of like starts to make your desensitized. So we'd go to the hospital to see him, and I actually missed seeing him awake. When I found out he had COVID, I started like texting him, and he said, yeah, I'm not feeling that great. And I said, well, what medications are you giving you? I remember. And he said, yeah, this is what, they're giving me. And, he sent me like a screenshot. He had a piece of paper with all the different medications. And, I said, well, what do you look like? And he sent me a picture of himself. I asked for a selfie. And that night, actually, he started having trouble breathing. So I had been planning to go see him, like, because, I was kind of like, he's going to be fine. He's inside this unit, yes, but, he's still talking to me. He's fine. I'll go see him tomorrow. And that night, actually, like around 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, I can't remember the time, but started getting calls and calls and calls and calls. But I was asleep. I was passed out.
From your mom?
From my mom, and I think my brother, too. And I woke up, and they'd been trying to reach me, and he had been struggling to breathe. And that night, they put him on a ventilator. They put him under, so he was like unconscious. So I missed. Yeah, I missed the window to go see him. I mean, they weren't letting anybody go in to see him anyways because he was in the COVID thing. I think they didn't even let my mom go in. I want to say, because at that time COVID was so like they didn't want anybody to contract it. So because I remember other stories where people would have COVID and nobody could see him. And that night he actually got put on the ventilator, and all of a sudden, kind of weird, but all of a sudden the doctor was like, yeah, I mean, you can go in and see him. It's like, okay, odd. But so the following day I let my job know, and drove up there to see him. They let me in, and he was like unconscious with the ventilator, helps you breathe and all that stuff. And yeah, he stayed like that for, I want to say, 2 weeks. And then and then my mom, actually, she asked the doctor, I mean, his organs were failing, and all that stuff. And she asked the doctor, because we've been hearing stories, that people were making miraculous recoveries, right? And one by one, his organs started like failing, And yeah, every time I would go, I'd like hold his hand. His hands were cold too. And he was like out of it. And then near the end of it, my mom asked the doctor, she was like, well, what do you suggest? What do you advise? And the doctor said, well, his organs have started to shut down. And she's like, well, the doctor was like, at this point, we could help him go easy, because there's probably no coming back. Well, not probably, but there's no chance, right? Doctors don't like to. So my mom said, okay, well, let's let him go. So what did they do? He was on a bunch of drugs. They gave him this one drug. I want to say it was morphine or something like that. But I was there in the room, actually, and my mom and my sister. We were all there, and they gave him these drugs, and they said, yeah, he'll probably pass in like the next 30 minutes. So we were there. I don't think it took 30 minutes, to be honest. They gave him these different drugs, and then he flatlined. You hear the little beep, beep, beep of the heart. And then, he was gone, yeah.
How did you feel about that decision?
I was thinking that, it was probably the best thing for him. Because when he got put on the ventilator for the first week, everybody was like, worried about it. Well, yeah, everybody was concerned. And I was going to go see him, and I was like holding his hand. I remember for like the first week and a half. Well, up until, he passed. But I was going there and was like, okay, well, the next time I see him will be the time that he's like making a recovery. So each day I'd go and be like, okay, he's about to start, he's about to start coming back. And I think after seeing him like immobilized for so long, when the decision was made to like just let him, it was kind of like, well, I'd seen him like deteriorate so much. It was like, well, maybe that's the best thing for him. You know?
Were you close to your dad?
Yeah, I was pretty close. Yeah.
Closer to your dad or your mom?
I think closer to my dad, for sure. Yeah. It's funny because when I got my phone, actually, when I was like 15, 16, and then I got my car actually when I was 16, I would drive all over. My mom would like text me, all the time, like, hey, where are you? What are you doing? And stuff like that. My dad didn't really do all that. And it was interesting because, but every time he'd call, I'd pick up the phone. And so.
But not if your mom called?
I was kind of like, well, she could wait, because she was a texter or whatever. But every time my dad called, I'd pick up the phone. And so it was crazy, actually, because, I don't know, I had just moved into my new place. And this was back before he got put on, before he was in the hospital. And this was like maybe a month before he was in the hospital. And I was doing something. I can't remember, but I remember where I was. I was standing right by the front door, about to go up the stairs. And I got a call. And I was like, who's this? That was my dad. So I said, hello. And he said, hey, we haven't seen you for a while. And he told me he was proud of me, for everything that I was doing. Mm. And I said, oh, yeah, thanks. And then at the end of it, I said, yeah, you should come up and see my new place. He said, yeah. And
that seems like a very special moment.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember it. Yeah, it was pretty special. Yeah. Yeah, that was the last time I actually talked to him on the phone. So, crazy stuff. But yeah, I was closer with my dad than my mom.
Did you guys do anything together?
What did we do? Well, as a kid, me and my older brother that passed, we'd go camping sometimes, because sometimes we did like the Boy Scout thing. We were Boy Scouts, in church activities, we go camping and stuff like that. So it was usually me, my older brother, and my dad doing all this. And then as we got older, me and my older brother and my dad we'd all go play pool sometimes. Well, not sometimes, but more often than not, we'd go play pool actually when we were like in our mid-teens, And then my brother passed actually a little bit after, my brother passed actually when I was 18. And so a couple years after that, I moved to Charlotte. And I had my kids, actually. So every time I'd go back to Burlington and visit them, my dad would always make food, which is interesting. I never noticed it until like years later, but yeah, every time I went to go visit him, no matter what time it was, he'd always be like, are you hungry? And at that time, usually I was, like, yeah, I can eat. And then he'd always like go in the kitchen and like cook like chicken or rice or beans or soup or something like that.
Did he make good Bolivian food? Did he know how to cook it?
He tried. I want to say, but
was it good?
he I don't know, maybe the way he seasons his chicken, maybe, I don't know, but I mean, he would never like say like this is like,
The way he
he would never say like this is what I grew up with or something like that. But he would make this food and we'd eat it. But yeah, it was interesting because every time I'd go, he'd make some food and we'd like sit down, and usually it was just him and me. I mean, my brothers and sisters sometimes were around, but usually they'd be off. And, the kids would run around with the grandma, and I'd be just chilling over there and like eating and talking. So it was pretty cool. And then, yeah, when I was 16, I had a Camaro I bought. He actually went with me to buy it. And all throughout the years of me having it, I think up until I was like maybe 25, I had that car. And so him and I would always work on it, change out like radiators and hoses and parts and things like that. So, yeah, so it was pretty cool.
Those are really nice memories of you and your dad.
Yeah.
So do you cook?
I do. Actually, I can follow a recipe pretty well.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's for me, it's like once you cook something, you can follow the recipe, whatever. But then, once you've cooked it and you've got that down, and I guess if you have a knowledge of, spices and things like that, then you can cook something and then, well, maybe I don't want to use a certain spice. You add something else and you just start, creating your own thing. So, yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Big proponent of that. Making.
Yeah.
So did you pick up any skills during COVID-19? I know you were working 2 jobs, so it might be kind of hard to add anything to it, but was there anything that, like, to your routine or a skill that you might have looked into during the pandemic?
I got really great at making boxes for Amazon. Yeah. But other than that, well, actually, crazy thing about Amazon, it was funny because I met actually one of my close friends there. Actually, we still talk. But I mean, we don't work for Amazon anymore. But when I first got hired, I had worked at another warehouse previously making boxes, and when I first got hired, I was introduced to this guy, and he worked right next to me, and I'd say, "Well, how do you make this? How do you make that?" And he'd be like, "Okay, this is how you do it." And so we did it. And making boxes is easy; anybody can do it. But him and I, we would just be working next to each other, working and talking. And we just make a box, keep on talking, make a box, keep on talking. And so it got to the point where holiday season came up, and they would actually hold us pretty much every time we went, but they would say, all right, this is who's doing the most, packages, getting the most packages sent out. And it'd usually be him or me. And so we would both be at the top of the list. Holiday season came, and we were both still going back and forth. And so it became a little like a friendly competition, And so we both got recognized for that, and the managers used to be like, okay, let's who's going to win this time? It was either him or me, and they put us next to each other sometimes. But then sometimes if there were more than one manager working, one manager would say, yeah, I want him on this line, and then I'd go to another one, so we wouldn't see each other. So it was kind of like, oh man. But making boxes, yeah, it's pretty straightforward, pretty easy. Around this time, I actually did try to sit for the first of my architecture exams and failed it twice. And so that kind of put me into a different mindset that it wasn't going to be easy, because I work for an architecture firm, but I'm not a licensed architect yet. I work right under the architect. And so it got me into the study mode. So I've actually passed one already, and I'm working on, I'm going to take my second one actually next month.
Congratulations.
And thanks.
When's your next one?
March 28th.
All right.
And then the next one's going to be, thanks. Then the next one's going to be 2 months after that, and I plan to be done with them by the end of this year. But other than that, I didn't really learn anything crazy over the whole COVID pandemic. Didn't learn anything useful, I think. Yeah.
Well, we're at 58 minutes, almost an hour, so I don't want to take up much more of your time.
Yeah.
But is there anything else that you would like to share with us before we kind of close this out?
As far as COVID, or
anything that you want to, make sure that the Living Archives knows, and anything that you'd like just to kind of say for the project?
Well, I'm really looking forward to see the whole project completed. I know you said it might take some time.
Thank you. Yeah. Me too. I'm excited too.
Yeah, it does seem pretty amazing. What you're doing here. So.
Oh well, I thank you for being a part of it.
Yeah, thanks. Or you're welcome. Yeah, thanks. Yeah.